So Suicide Squad, that's a good movie, right? Oh. How's it going, everybody, and welcome to my review of Suicide Squad, a film that, like Batman v Superman before it, has been absolutely panned by critics. I think DC fans, including myself, are getting a huge sense of deja vu because they're like, God damn it, like when is a film involving characters that I love gonna get universal acclaim? Well, certainly not this time around. But much like Batman v Superman before it, I enjoyed Suicide Squad. But before we get into the whole pros and cons, all that rigmarole, let me tell you a bit about Suicide Squad. So Suicide Squad is directed by David Ayer, known as of late for films such as Fury, End of Watch, which you should totally check out, by the way. End of Watch is a great film. And it revolves around the ensemble of villains turned anti-heroes from the DC roster, including Deadshot, played by Will Smith, Harley Quinn, played by Margot Robbie, Captain Boomerang, Jai Courtney, I think his name is, and a host of other guys. In a desperate attempt by Amanda Waller to kind of put together some sort of response to Superman in the event that another Superman-like being would come down to Earth and, instead of saving it, terrorize it. And the threat that they have to deal with in Midtown emerges, and they kind of have to get dispatched to deal with it without going into too much spoilers. But I think this will be a kind of spoiler-filled review, so if you haven't seen Suicide Squad, I'd recommend you go see it and come back and check out this review. So now that the whole premise is out of the way, let's go into the pros of the film. And what I really liked about the film is the cast and the characters. I think, kudos to David Ayer for putting this film together and making me care about these characters, much like Guardians of the Galaxy did. Although these in Suicide Squad, these characters aren't so foreign like they were in Guardians of the Galaxy. He does a good job of establishing these characters without them having their own solo movies, all that sort of stuff. And the film really doubles down on Deadshot and Harley Quinn to kind of to drive that forward. Those are the two characters that you certainly will latch onto when you watch the film. They have the most screen time, they have the most kind of conversations and scenes together, and they really kind of like hold the whole group together. But much to the film's credit, it doesn't then leave those other characters on the sideline or on the wayside, so to speak. Captain Boomerang was a real standout. I think Jai Courtney played the character really well. He had a few funny standout moments with his Aussie accent. Katana, who isn't technically part of the squad, but she's kind of brought in by Rick Flag, who is this kind of like your typical patriarchal military guy, to kind of oversee the whole operation and make sure these Suicide Squad members don't go off and abandon the mission. But if they do, as in the comics and the animated movies, they have the chips inside their neck that can be detonated at any point, those being bombs. So if they do disobey orders or try and kill everybody, or fail the mission, so to speak, then they can just get thrown under the bus and killed, sort of thing, like Amanda Waller says. So yeah, the film does a really good job of establishing these characters, and the dynamics between them that they play off one another is really quite strong. You start to develop and care for these characters, obviously some more so than others. But yeah, the film does a really good job of that. There's a particular scene where they all kind of share a drink in a bar that really kind of hammers that home. They are throwing banter back and forth. Harley Quinn's taking the mick out of how ugly Killer Croc looks, but Killer Croc responds with like, "I'm beautiful," or something like that. So you really get a sense of camaraderie and kind of friendship between these characters. But what the film does well is it jumps between different tones, so it's much more comedic and somewhat light-hearted and whimsical compared to something like Batman v Superman, but you could still tell that it takes place in that same universe because it touches on quite heavy themes. It taps into the psyche of these characters and what motivates them, and their kind of troubled and fractured psyches, all that sort of stuff. I mean, in particular with Harley Quinn, because a certain character is introduced into the mix that kind of throws the whole operation apart and tears it apart, and that character is the Joker, played by Jared Leto. Now he learns of Harley Quinn's predicament, learns that she's out of prison, and being the very powerful mob boss that he is, he puts together brings together his men and his arsenal, all that sort of stuff, and goes after Harley Quinn. And ever since Jared Leto was announced to play the Joker, and that first image came out of him, screaming with all the tattoos and stuff, there was a lot of trepidation around, how he'll be portrayed, and is this true to the character? But I think Jared Leto, he somewhat steals the show in this. He's not on screen for very long, but when he is, I certainly couldn't take my eyes off him. He's so unhinged and unpredictable, and he channels a lot of Heath Ledger in the way he speaks, but he has kind of and he's certainly in his mannerisms as well, but he's got the kind of the look and the appearance of, somewhat Jack Nicholson. He's a mob boss, he's a crime boss, with all his kind of silver teeth and his cane and stuff like that. But he's very much a fusion of all the Jokers we've seen on screen, but he's very much his own Joker. It's very different from what we've seen at the same time, and it's common knowledge now that Jared Leto went to extreme lengths to prepare for the role. Not socializing with the cast and sending them with gifts, and I think he even met with like mob bosses or something like that. He took it to the extreme. He went very method, so to speak. But I think it definitely paid off. He played the character really well, and I can't wait to see more of the character. And it's a shame because reports came out that a lot of his scenes were cut. I think there's meant to be like an extra 10 minutes of scenes that were cut from the film, which is a shame. But no doubt we'll get those in the home video release, in like behind the deleted scenes. Excuse me. So yeah, Jared Leto was certainly a standout. Really impressed by his performance, and as in the same with Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn, she absolutely nailed the character. She was very funny, she was very sexy, all that sort of stuff. Will Smith as well, got to give a shout out to Will Smith as Deadshot. He was, as I said before, he's the kind of the leader of the group, so to speak, and you definitely kind of sympathize more with his kind of standing. He has a daughter, and he's only trying to do what's right for his daughter, all that sort of stuff, and they really they drive that home. Another character that they try and do that with is El Diablo, and how he has a kind of arc in the film. He starts off as a very kind of reclusive character. He doesn't want to use his powers anymore, and that's because he lost it one night with his wife when she found like a drug stash, and he got angry. He lost control, and he pretty much like burned his whole house down, killing his wife and his child. So from that day he was like, I'm not that person anymore, I'm changed. But he kind of goes through this arc in the film where he kind of comes to terms with who he is. He starts to learn his powers. He starts to use his powers, that saved the team quite a few times, and he actually goes to the length of giving his life to complete the mission and save the world, essentially. With all that said, I kind of didn't latch on to that character as much as I did Will Smith. I appreciate the attempt to kind of have that arc, but as I said, the two characters that you'll definitely kind of find yourself invested in the most is Will Smith and Harley Quinn, and I think that the film is very self-aware of that. And yeah, in terms of the cons, do a few jokes fall flat? Sure. Does the plot sometimes become convoluted and you question what the hell's going on? Sure. The whole threat that they have to deal with in Midtown is kind of Enchantress, so it's very ironic that Amanda Waller puts this team together in response to a Superman-like threat, but it's actually one of their own that becomes the threat in this situation. So that's kind of an interesting narrative plot point, and a certain scene after the credits rolled touches on that, and how Amanda Waller kind of wants to keep things under the rug, otherwise she'll be held responsible. And quite frankly, there's a massive plot hole in the film straight away, in the sense that Amanda Waller wants to put this team together to try and deal with a Superman-like threat, but I'm sorry, if you put the Suicide Squad against Superman, they've got absolutely no chance. So yeah, they have to deal with Enchantress, who kind of revives her brother, and then her goal is to kind of wipe out the world's armies and kind of build her own army and take over the world, essentially. Very cliche, but she does that by you know, capturing soldiers, and then she turns them into these weird, like, alien looking creatures with all these spores, you know, like spores all over their heads and stuff. So that, you know, she turns, you know, your regular you know, citizen into a soldier, essentially. And that's kind of the threat that I have to deal with throughout the film. So, you know, sometimes it's, you know, I question what the hell was going on. You know, Rick Flag has a relationship with the other side of Enchantress, if I get a name, but, you know, the Doctor, the more human side, shall we say. But that was another part of the film I didn't really care much about, you know, when they finally beat Enchantress and, you know, she is rid of, and the Doctor comes back and they share their nice moment where they thought, oh, I thought I killed you, or I thought I killed you, that sort of stuff. But, you know, I didn't really care much about that, to be honest with you. The film had a few pacing issues at points. The film starts really weird. It starts off with with two scenes of Will Smith in the prison, you know, boxing, punching his punching bag, and then it shows Margot Robbie in her prison cell, kind of doing all these, you know, gymnastic-like stuff on the bars. But then it cuts to Amanda Waller kind of proposing Task Force X, and then it goes on to establish their characters again and reintroduce them again alongside other members of the squad. So I kind of felt like that whole start was somewhat unnecessary and a bit weird. But, you know, speaking of kind of establishing the characters, that, you know, the film does a really good job towards the start of kind of like, very stylistically as well, showing you the kind of the characters and their pasts and what they do and what they're about, sort of stuff. But yeah, those are the only real kind of criticisms I had of the film, really. You know, I went in expecting it to be absolutely diabolical, with like 33% or something on Rotten Tomatoes, I think it has. But, you know, ultimately I came away from the film like very pleased. Like I had fun. There's only a few things that, you know, were I could say that were bad about the film. Am I going to be talking about it in 2-3 weeks? Probably not. You know, I think Batman v Superman's a better film. I enjoyed that a lot more. I'm still talking about Batman v Superman to this day. But Suicide Squad was certainly a good introduction for these characters. You know, David Ayer was a very, you know, he directed the film very well. There was a lot of great action sequences. He loved his slow-mo. You know, there was some great shots in there. Kind of great kind of windows into these characters. You know, he juggles two different tones really well, and he does a really good job of spinning all these plates and all these different characters and all these things going on. You know, Batman even shows up, the Flash even turns up, albeit very briefly. So I think he does a very good job, considering as well that the film apparently had a very troubled production, with Warner Brothers again stepping in and seeing a different vision for the film. Apparently there's two edits, one by David Ayer, one by the guys that edited the trailer, sorry. But yeah, I think Suicide Squad, I'm not going to give it a score because scores suck. I'm just going to say, you know, hopefully this kind of review has somewhat informed you about and persuaded you to go and see the film. Hopefully, I definitely think you should. Definitely check it out. Don't go by Rotten Tomatoes, 33%, and all these, like, you know, all these reviews that are just, you know, hating it for ridiculous reasons. I think the critics are, again, far too harsh. You know, they clearly have something against superhero films, and DC superhero films in particular. The films aren't perfect by no stretch of the imagination. Batman v Superman isn't perfect, but I mean, if you're going to sit there and tell me that Independence Day Resurgence and X-Men Apocalypse is better than Suicide Squad, I mean, you can just get the fuck out of here, because those films are absolute trash. I mean, so yeah, Suicide Squad, definitely go and see it over the weekend or whenever you can. And yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at LevelUpLynch. This is kind of the first video kicking off my solo venture here on YouTube. So yeah, until the next one, folks, take it easy.